Hey, Sunshine Clubbers, Pastor Marshall here again. Remember that I normally teach at the Blossom Valley Sunshine Club. During these COVID times, I'm getting to teach a lot of you guys. Well, I want to give a quick shout out to my BVSC kids and leaders. I miss you, and I can't wait to see you again, hopefully really soon. Well, you might remember that our last lesson was about Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. You remember that Jacob gave his favorite son a coat that was all kinds of colors because he was his favorite. You might remember that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea for parents to have favorites. Well, you might remember he had 10 other kids, and those brothers hated Joseph because he was his dad's favorite. And so, you might remember they sold him as a slave to their enemies. And remember that God blessed Joseph because he loved Joseph, and he raised Joseph up to the second highest in all of Egypt. Well, I told you last time that the brothers had to come for food. So let's talk about that. They lived in the land of Israel, which is kind of shaped like a bean. And they sold Joseph as a slave to the land of Egypt, which is really big. Well, they had to come from Israel down to Egypt to get food. And so, there's a new part of the story though. There was one other brother besides these 10, and he was the littlest brother, and his name was Benjamin. And he became his dad's new favorite. No, that's not a good idea. His dad didn't learn it with Joseph, so he had a new favorite named Benjamin. Well, the dad was afraid that Benjamin would get hurt, and so he didn't send him to Egypt, but he did send the other 10 brothers down to Egypt to get food. Joseph was in charge of all the food distribution. It was his idea to give food and to save it and to give it. Well, when they all came to his house to get food, they didn't recognize him. He was probably wearing Egyptian eyeliner and maybe an Egyptian wig. He probably looked very different from when they had sold him as a slave to their enemies. Well, they didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And Joseph, well, he was kind of mean to them. He made them do a lot of games, shenanigans. He made them jump through a lot of hoops. And in the end, they confessed that they had a baby brother that wasn't with them. And Joseph said, "Unless I meet your baby brother and all the rest of you, I will not give you the food that you need to survive this famine." Well, they had to go back to Israel, and they had to tell their dad Jacob this news that they had to bring their baby brother. Jacob didn't want the baby brother to go. He waited until they were almost completely out of food, until they were going to starve to death, and then finally he sent all of the 11 brothers back down to Egypt. And when they came to Joseph, they bowed down to him. Now you might remember that that was what God had said would happen to Joseph, that his brothers would bow to him. And that was one of the reasons that they didn't like him, because he was daddy's favorite, and he had told them that they were going to one day bow down to him. Well, it came true. And the moment that it came true, Joseph started to cry. He confessed to his brothers who he was, and he told them this: "What you intended for evil," selling him as a slave to their enemies, "what you intended for evil, God turned out for good. The saving of the whole world. He used me to create enough food and give out food to the whole world." Well, God saved the whole world through Joseph. And Pharaoh was so proud of Joseph that he gave him and his whole family a big piece of Egypt to live in. And so the brothers went back, and they got their dad and their mom and all of their kids, and they all came and they lived in this land that is called the land of Goshen. Well, then some bad things happened after they grew into a ginormous family of millions of people. But we'll save that for next time. But why do I tell you this story? Well, I want you to know that God had a plan for Joseph to save the world, and that God has a plan for you to save you. And just like God spoke to Joseph and told him that he was going to save the whole world through him, God is going to speak to you someday. And he's going to tell you that he wants to save you. In fact, some of you, God might have already spoken to you and told you about his son Jesus and how he loves you and how he died on the cross for you and how he rose from the dead. And if you believe in that story, you'll be saved. Maybe God is speaking to you right now. I promise you, someday in your life, he's going to speak to you. And he wants you to respond to him. He wants you to follow him. He wants you to love him. And if you do that, just like Joseph was used by God to save the whole world, God will speak to you and save you. You just have to love him and follow him. And if you do that, he will save you from dying forever. And sure, we're all going to grow old and we're all going to die, but the Bible says that when we die, we'll be raised again to a new life, just like Jesus. And we will get to live with him forever and ever. Well, how did I do? Let's review. Do you remember how many kids that Jacob had? Do you remember who was the new favorite kid? Do you remember what did Joseph do to his 10 brothers when they came down to Egypt that wasn't very nice? And then, can you remember what did all of his brothers do, all 11 of them, when they returned to Egypt? And do you remember, how did Joseph respond when those 11 brothers did what God said that they were going to do? And then, how did he respond? Do you remember, what did Pharaoh give Joseph and all of his family in Egypt? And then finally, what did Jacob and the whole family do after Pharaoh's gift? Well, I hope you have a great Sunshine Club, and I hope you kids are staying safe. And I miss you, and I can't wait to see you again. God bless.